introducing Jonathan, who's going to be hosting the panel, and he will introduce the speakers, but I'll just give you an overview of what we're doing here. The topic of this panel is Australian psychedelic ecosystem, activism, education and community. In 2023, psychedelics are not contained within an underground bubble anymore, as they're integrated into the respectable worlds of therapy and corporate control. This panel will share the rich history of grounded activism and education in the Australian psychedelic community as mainstream medicalisation and commercialism start to emerge. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Will. So my name's Jonathan Carmichael, and most of my friends know me as Ronnie. It's just a nickname, and that nickname is literally an alias from when the work we did, you couldn't use a real name. So most people will always call me Ronnie, and it's only in the last couple of years that we've gone out with a little bit of Jonathan. And that's, yeah, I think it's just a good metaphor for like what we're talking about here, which is the work of an underground movement that has been going for, you know, 30, 40 years, of which we are probably the last, like we represent elements of the last 20 years. So, you know, we fully acknowledge the work of many people before us, and fully acknowledge the work of, essentially the Indigenous people that have carried these plants that we work with. Many that are here in Australia, but many have come to Australia. And it's very hard for us because we kind of classify ourselves as ethnobotanists, and ethnobotanists kind of have to really work in a hard space where we have to acknowledge that the plants that we love and build relationships with were actually often obtained under circumstances that were not great. So we're trying to, I guess, build relationships with plants that we've acquired from friends and gardens that have come from all around the world, and we have to just, you know, take on board at a very, like, you know, constant level that we're trying to turn something that is a beautiful and rich plant into an ideal, build a relationship in a really great way, but acknowledge that there also is some negativity to how these plants came to Australia often. So that's just a bit of a struggle of us. Like, you know, when you go out to your garden and you see all these amazing plants and you think that one's from Peru and that one's from there and that one's from there, here, but the story of the plant getting here is not necessarily ideal. And then we're now forming new relationships with those plants, and we're trying to make the most of them and make sure that these plants still exist regardless of legality. So for many of us, and certainly for Entheogenesis australis, a lot of what we're doing is around plant sharing. So we're trying to actually take out a third party, in the sense of we're trying to let people build their relationships with their plants so they don't need to have a drug dealer. They don't need to necessarily consult lots of other people or prescriptions and all that. They can build a relationship with a plant and find a balance with that plant and make the most out of it for the plant and themselves. And then share those plants, give them away. Make sure that no matter what the law is, you know, for lack of a better word, and a modern word that's overused, decentralized. We're trying to get the drug, the plants, into everyone's garden. Okay. Now, the topic essentially is around activism, education and community. Essentially, activism has definitely been a sub-thread the whole way through the time we've worked. Activism has taken many, many forms, but essentially, at the most, you know, basic form, it's all of us standing up and pushing back. And just, you know, we're at the table with our family or a friend or at work, and even on a basic level, someone says something and you just hold them accountable for it. You know, remind them that some of these things that they're told is just bullshit. There's lots of other ways to do much stronger activism, and we're doing that. But at a basic level, it's about us pushing back at a one-on-one level, and then at a cultural level, and then at a legal level. Okay. Now, before the last little segue is, we're basically about to go into the psychedelic. Big Pharma is about to start rolling out psychedelics across Australia in different ways. you know, the community organisations to this point that we're about to talk about, and things that like Will's organisation, they're all mainly been like volunteer based. There hasn't been any money in this space. These are people who've decided to pick up the sword and plant the seed, and generally do it as a volunteer basis for 20 years often. So it's quite a dedicated scenario, you know. They're people who've woken up and they really feel strongly about this, and so they've carried the torch in a volunteer situation often. So I sort of joked this morning, I think, to Martin when I was saying that we're about to hit the age of the the psychedelic high gloss. We're all about to start getting big glossy magazines telling us how cool these psychedelic retreat centers are. We're about to get inundated by the new environment that's upon us, and Big Pharma is just it's gonna be something completely different. Lots of money in the scene, lots of people with really strong motivations that aren't really connected to the plant or what the plant is necessarily, if you work with the plant, would be asking you to do or communicating to you. These are people that are trying to do mass scale medicine that is far too expensive for the average person. And so, you know, I think a very simple example is $5,000 is probably the minimum amount it would cost to have, bare minimum. So if you'd like to go and score mushrooms, it's 500 times cheaper to buy it on the street for $10. So we're talking about a context. I'm not saying that there isn't other benefits to the therapy and things like that, but we're talking about drugs that are already available to us, but they're 500 times more expensive, and you're going to have to wait in line and ring up doctors for like 6 months to a year to get that care. So it's a pretty weird, you know, it's not ideal. So from there, as we dawn on the psychedelic big pharma revolution in Australia, I just wanted to get all our panellists to introduce themselves, let us know the organisations that they work for, which is a couple, or their projects, and yeah, give us a feeling for their journey in the psychedelic community and the psychedelic underground. So, Liam? Turn it on, I think.
Ta-da! Fantastic. Cool. Thank you, Ronnie.
No worries.
Hi, my name is Liam. I work with Entheogenesis australis, which is a mouthful, and you'll probably notice all of us here will quickly refer to it as EGA. So that's what we mean when we say that. And I do a bunch of stuff with EGA, as do a lot of people, because it's kind of like a primarily volunteer organisation, and everyone just pulls their weight where and when they can. I'm not sure how much Ronnie fleshed it out, but basically what we do is educate people on ethnobotanical issues, and that takes shape as a lot of things, as well as community, because like the line between education and community I think can be blurred, and it should be emphasized that it also is about community, I guess, as well as education. But we've got an online presence that we publish a bunch of things like different resources on how to identify magic mushrooms, how to identify cactus, different kind of issues impacting our community, and we try to act as a meeting point for people that want to discuss and understand these issues. And as well, my own side project is specifically focused on cactus, and that's called the Mescaline Garden, because I am deeply obsessed with cactus. And yeah, those are my plant things that I do. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name's Kane. I also work with EGA. It's definitely a passion project that I'm very passionate about working with, and we have a really lovely community, and it's a pleasure to be able to work with this group to communicate the plant knowledge that we do. I also work with other groups such as the Australian Psychedelic Society. I have worked in the past with fungi groups, my community applied mycology, which is kind of all the focus is to help communicate fungi knowledge and to promote that. I also work with an overseas group, the Entheome Foundation, which is a non-profit group, and we're trying to do the full genome sequencing of every single psilocybe mushroom to try to keep it out of the commercial hands so that that genetic knowledge stays in the public domain and can't be used for those kind of commercial intentions. And we're getting there. We're just about to publish the Elenii, the Solus Elenii genome, and we've got a few others in the pipeline to come out soon. My own private my personal project is guerrilla mycology. I'm very, very passionate about communicating knowledge around fungi, particularly how to cultivate fungi. I would like to be able to see everybody feel comfortable with being able to grow their own mushrooms. You know, I see it as a fairly easy thing to be able to do at home, and I just love teaching people how to grow their mushrooms, and they come back to me a couple of months later and go, I did it, and I grew my own, and it's just a real pleasure. I'm going to pass over to Pixie.
Was anyone here for Kane's talk yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pixie, and I do also, like, we all do stuff with EGA, but yeah, so I founded the Patch. We call it, for simplicity's sake, you can find us on Facebook as the Patch, but it's the Psychedelically Aware Talking Circle Hub. And this was basically in response to the Four Corners episode that aired last year. While everyone's had a lot of different feelings about the matter, there's clearly some issues within our community that we're better to approach head on ourselves rather than just let it fester and cop the backlash and all of the harm that comes with it. Unfortunately, not everyone who moves into psychedelics has everyone's best interests at heart. There are people who are just out to make money. There are people who are just not ensuring the safety of the people that they're working with. Being underground, you know, we either wait for outside forces to come in and do it for us, or we grow up and be responsible, and we come together as a community and we talk it out. So hence it's a community talking circle hub. And so we meet twice a month to talk online, so everyone can come in from Zoom. So we also do have our group, but basically we're having those hard conversations. You know, we're talking about the great things we got out of psychedelics, but we're not just doing the hype. We're talking about the harms and how to avoid them. We're teaching all of these new people who are either psychedelic naive or, you know, limited experience maybe a long time ago, who are suddenly flooding in with all of this attention. But, you know, they need some help to know how to navigate this space. We are seeing psychedelics re-enter the broader community for the first time in many decades. We need planning, guys. This is a big transition. So we're hoping to have those conversations to help people just navigate it and get the best that they can out of it and then minimize the harms.
Hello, my name's Martin, and I've had a close, sometimes obsessive and sometimes unhealthy relationship with plants and EGA for about 20 years now. So thank you all for coming. It's lovely to see you here, and here we are in the self-help group. I've been watching EGA grow and flourish since we really sort of brought this together in a formal sense about just on 20 years ago. And I think that the key from my point of view is the word ecosystem has many sort of dimensions, and I think it really is a very crucial sort of point that I hope we'll discuss a little bit later in the talk. Let's see, EGA and the plant community really bring together people with many, many different skills and perspectives. I think my superpower is in research and in science and so on, and so I've been working towards and beyond setting up PRISM, Psychedelic Research in Science and Medicine, which we established in 2011. And our express mission was to try and make an Australian contribution to the global research effort into exploring the benefits of psychedelics, particularly in the medical sense, but certainly well beyond that as well, because there's such a universe to be explored in terms of the effects of psychedelics and our relationship with psychedelics. And I think that's really what's kept us going all this time. I'm happy to say that I think we've made fantastic progress over that time, but of course there's a long way to go. And so coming back to that concept of ecosystem, which is, to my mind, it's a question of sustainability. I'm just very interested to see how the sustainability, how we are going to sustain this community in the face of quite dramatic changes right now. So yeah, interesting times, and I look forward to discussing them.
I often refer to Martin when he's not around as the most important person in psychedelic research in Australia, but don't tell him that. But yeah, there is many other groups that work in the community around EGA. EGA is by no means the only active group in here, in this area, but it has been going for over 20 years and has achieved a lot in that time. And really, it's a bit, attending EGA these days is a little bit different to attending EGA in 2004. And so one of the biggest things around that time was that we didn't have the internet like we do today, and we also didn't communicate or even necessarily have the language or maybe comfort to connect with people around drugs the way that we do now. There's a lot of more camaraderie, and we all feel comfortable. So one thing that EGA really set out to do was to create a space for education and to really create a safe space where people could connect and with their kindred, and that was as important as the resources and the education.
Yeah, you're on access with the mic there.
Yeah, this is my first time ever trying to do this. So yeah,
that's it.
Got it. So essentially what we learned pretty quickly is that it didn't really matter who you got from overseas to come and educate everyone. People were having just as much fun in the campsite and connecting, and so we've tried to really keep that going, the community side of it. And then we've also tried to extend by creating resources that everyone can access, and we've always had a really strong feeling that even though we have to charge for tickets, we really want to get all of the assets and all of the information we can out to the community, and sometimes that takes a long time because we're volunteers. But it's a real strong, it's really strong behind what we do. So I'm very proud to say that, like, at the moment we've got a great, I think our YouTube channel is probably a really good example. So there's basically 160 lectures and video content that's been produced by EGA and then given back to the community. And many people haven't even sort of been to that resource, but if you go there, you'll see it's high quality educational resources primarily produced by Australians for our community, and it's a really good example, just one example of what EGA has been able to achieve. And then I'm only going to sort of use this one resource example, but so how I became to form EGA with 4 other people was about 3 years before. Essentially, I was trying to find subs in Victoria, and there was the internet. Yeah, subs, magic mushrooms, subs. And essentially there were, the internet really wasn't what it is today, and so we started looking for books in the library and books at university, and essentially, like, you would travel 2 hours to a book in a library only to get there to find out that the page was ripped out. So the idea of, like, connecting the dots, like, what's the dose, what does it look like, and a lot of the information wasn't Australian based, so if you could find stuff online, the dosage level was not at all sort of that relevant. And I mean, there's a couple of people here I know from Shaman Australis, and Shaman Australis, we have to acknowledge, was the most important resource in Australia at the time. But I spent 6 months obsessing over finding these mushrooms, that 6 months later when I found them, with the 4 other people that I was with, we had built ourselves into such a mental state about finding these mushrooms that I can liken the experience to an atomic bomb going off in our mind that led from an experience that went from ecstasy to agony and back again. So all 4 people that took the mushrooms in this strange house in Box Hill About 3 hours later, no one was in the house, and reports are to people who found the door open after the medical people arrived was that the house was covered in mud from head to tail, and the mushrooms that the medical people took away was like this big. It was like how much? Pardon? That's all right. It wasn't a question. So we didn't know the dose. We took an amount. We got excited, and I was ecstasy. I had a ball, but everything else was from sort of maybe to what the fuck, and that was interesting to agony. So one gentleman ended up in hospital, and again, maybe it wasn't the right thing to happen, but again, we just didn't know. So we set about trying to create resources to correct that. That was the motivation. We were trying to find, okay, this gap, how can we help fill it? So Kane has made an amazing resource which now kind of fulfills beyond anything I ever thought would be possible. So I'm not sure, do you want to tell us a little bit about that specific resource, because I think it's a really good example of the educational resources we've made.
Okay. Yep. Am I going to get feedback? We're working this out.
Ronnie?
Yes.
That way.
Okay. Yep.
My one doesn't go off.
That's not.
You should work.
Okay, so is everyone mics off right now? You're two.
Yep.
Okay, so who's talking? Kane.
Yeah, I'm talking.
Alright, go Kane.
Okay.
Alright. Cool. Yes. Okay.
Very big hall.
Yeah, very, very big hall. So I think there's two resources that we're referring to, Ronnie.
There is.
So there was, first off, there's a document that I was the main author of, the Psilocybe suberugosa PDF resource that was written up. Reference.
That's what it's called. If you want to find it
Resource guide, reference guide.
Reference guide.
Oh, okay.
research for it.
Yeah. Which is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, and it's been spread pretty widely now, and we even published it in the EGA journal, which we didn't bring a copy of. We should have. Anyway. And then the other resource is the Psilocybe suberugosa YouTube video as well, which is about 10 to 15 minutes long, and I describe all the features and the ecology of how to find these amazing mushrooms. And I kind of shared Jonathan's kind of feeling about, like, because I went through a very similar experience growing up in Tasmania, and it's just like, I want to find these mushrooms, and going to libraries, and pretty much the same deal. The page would be ripped out of the book. And there was only really a handful of guides at the time anyway, so how do you find information about these? And then how do you find information about the dosing? There was some kind of quirky American books, but then they were talking about American species as well. So, and I guess over time it's just like, okay, I want to find these mushrooms, and then having encounters with poisonous lookalikes, potentially almost getting poisoned by picking the wrong mushrooms a couple of times. You know, and then we're also looking at things like Amanita muscaria as well. That's another species, and then finding things like that look like Pantherina, and there's just clearly a lack of information around these species and how to collect them, how to prepare them, and how to take them. So, given the opportunity to then create these resources for EGA, it was definitely a jumping in and yeah, let's do this and let's get it out into the community and make it freely available so that people have the opportunity to learn and share and discuss.
I'm going to try and plug this in, so turn that off. Alright. Hello? So the community itself had been, you know, uprising against the suppression of use of altered, you know, substances that produce altered states, and obviously there's been a long cultural history. And for us coming in sort of around 1995, dancing our asses off for about 5 years and then deciding to work on EGA, essentially the community was there pushing back. The community already knew that these substances were safe, and that they could really do a lot of healing and you know, and the thing that a lot of people don't like to talk about, but now we're moving beyond the medical stuff, we can say they were valuably for entertainment. They brought us happiness. You know, we're not trying to always heal. Bringing about happiness is just as important, because some of us don't need healing, or not at all times at least. So yeah, absolutely. But what I'm saying is, your baseline, you don't have to be broken. You know,
consciousness.
Exploring consciousness.
There's facility beyond just healing and therapy.
Absolutely, and it's been shelved. So using substances for enjoyment, connection is one of the major reasons that people do it, has been suppressed a bit and kept down. But with EGA, we're able to really push back and find the language and feel comfortable to really push that forward. But what we learned pretty quickly was that we wanted to take it into research, the research side of things. So the community itself kind of self-identified that we'd made this community space and we'd started to make resources, but we needed to push back further. And so this is where PRISM was formed. So I was going to just sort of throw it to Martin and just say, what were some of the struggles? Because PRISM is certainly a community organisation that grew up, but what were some of the early struggles you faced when you decided to say, we're here, psychedelics, and we're gonna try and push psychedelics forward in a medical setting? What were some of the struggles the first 5-10 years that you faced?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so basically there was certainly a prehistory of clinical use and research globally as well as in Australia, in fact much more globally than in Australia. But that had been buried, of course, through the war on drugs, to the extent that it really became a complete sort of career suicide situation for anybody to express any interest in exploring this very, very fascinating sort of field and potentially very therapeutically beneficial field. So we became increasingly aware, not long after the beginnings of EGAs, it happened that research was recommencing particularly into psilocybin. Firstly, in healthy volunteers for the sort of expansion of consciousness and the improvement of, or the betterment of well people, I think was the sort of the term that was being used. And then we became aware of the research into therapeutic applications of psilocybin and of MDMA. And so this sort of led was the groundswell for us to sort of take this on board and start to try and develop it in Australia as well. Because we felt a responsibility to the Australian community and to the global community that we knew that Australia had a really a good deep foundation of knowledge that could be shared, and we've got a lot of wisdom collectively, of course. Our particular challenges were that we were faced still with a deep conservatism in the research community. We were faced with a reasonably rigid sort of framework of research and a regulatory framework which included the scheduling laws of psychedelic drugs, including psilocybin and MDMA. But we also we saw that as an opportunity to work within the framework to try and build things out. And this has been a sort of a deliberate strategy globally as well as within Australia to try medicalisation as the first sort of step towards a broader destigmatisation and a legitimisation, sorry about these long words, I'm having trouble saying them, legitimisation of psychedelics as a valid sort of area of study and potentially a therapeutic sort of area as well. And so, as I say, we started out in 2011 with this sort of rather optimistic view that we could just sort of lay out a protocol and that we could just sort of get it approved and we could find funding and we could get research going to kickstart things in Australia. We very quickly came to the realisation that that was not to be the case, and so 2012 we were knocked back by a Human Research Ethics Committee, partly because I suspect we were very wet behind the ears when it came to sort of starting research anyway, but I do think we had that sort of deep conservatism in the academic field that we had to negotiate. It took us another 3 years to find another group of people to try and put a second protocol together and to put that together as a research project. That also was knocked back at that time by Deakin University. I'm very happy to name names. Anybody from Deakin University here?
Dr. Will Lloyd was in town recently, but he's not.
We were knocked back primarily because Deakin University was shit scared of the potential sort of media shitstorm that might sort of envelop us if we did try and initiate psychedelic medical research. So they basically knocked it on the head before it could even get to an ethics committee for approval. It took another 3 years essentially, or certainly 2 and a bit years before finally it seemed that the tide had turned. And that really coincided with a significant shift in media, global media exposure. The book by Michael Pollan had just been published and was really gaining some cred, I guess. And the results of the first medical studies of psilocybin-assisted therapy for end-of-life anxiety and depression were really starting to make some waves in the medical and research communities. And so that really was the turning point for us. So from 2011 to 2018, when we started working on St Vincent's Hospital Melbourne study of psilocybin-assisted therapy in end-of-life anxiety and depression, was a 7 or 8 year period. My sense is that things happened at the right time, and I think that it was really time. It was slightly overdue, but it really was the time in Australia to bring that about. And I'm very, very happy and proud to say that we've really been we were the starting point for a real proliferation of research. Now the journey continues, and of course medicalisation is only one sort of part of the overall sort of bigger picture. But I feel that this has been a significant step forward in the conversation in Australia, the acceptance and legitimacy of psychedelics, and I'm really very proud and looking forward to the next few steps.
Why the university setting and the research setting was taking a long time to catch up, the underground medicine world was booming. So I was sort of going to ask Pixie if you didn't mind giving us a bit of a feel for, what the patch and sort of like why is the patch needed, what are the goals of the patch, and how does that sort of link into the underground medicine world, and
so I am a neuroscientist and I am studying psychedelics, but what I do with the patch isn't really about medical models. There's a team of us who are really helping people who are DIYing, but also people who are accessing this underground network of people who call themselves shamans or facilitators, healers, therapists, practitioners. There's a bunch of different names, people who are giving people psychedelics for money. And sometimes this works out well and sometimes it does not. Sometimes people are very inexperienced, and even if they have the best of intentions, they're all like excited, oh, this is going to fix everyone, I'm going to dose my friends, I'm totally aware of what I'm doing and I'm going to take money from other people, but they just don't have the ability to safely navigate people through. And so even if they do have 20, 30, 40 people who are happy, there still can be real harms that come with this. And so as it, I guess, proliferates in our culture, we really, really need to get moving on that decriminalisation, because aside from making now a huge amount of the Australian population criminals, it is an innate right that we should be allowed to work with the plant medicines and fungi that we have had forever and a day. No one has the right to deny people to be able to access or self-treat if they want to. It's just ridiculous. So we want to help support anyone and everyone who wants to be able to access them. If they want to DIY, if they want to go to a therapist, here's some red flags, here's some things to look out for, here's some things that you might want to see in a person that you want to work with. Just helping people to navigate this system, because otherwise you've got a lot of people who are very vulnerable, a lot of people who are like, this is their last resort, this is their last chance. So it's even just directing people to PMANZ, make sure that you picked the right mushroom. If people want to be able to do this, we want to make sure that they can do it safely and not taken advantage of. So we are also now considering the medical models, because we're like, oh shit, big capitalism is also encroaching on that. But ultimately we rose out of the underground just to help make sure that whoever wanted to do it themselves didn't feel like they had to go to a facilitator, or if they are, that they're aware of how to prepare, that they know what to expect, and that they can see those red flags and avoid people not just go there because like, oh yeah, I really wanted to take this thing, you know, just take the hype down a little bit, take the time, get to know the community, get to know the experience, prepare, know what to do afterwards. Link in with people that you can actually talk to about the psychedelic experience, because if you've got no one around you who understands what you've just been through, even that can be very isolating. So yeah, we're just really trying to help everyone to not have to be reliant on big pharma, on shamans, but if you're going to at least help to do that as safely as possible.
All right, Liam.
Can I just mention case in point? The recent headlines, I think it was May the 3rd, Sydney Morning Herald, Cambo death in Mullumbimby from a facilitator who I sort of glossed over the whole article itself, but you can find it if you just Google Cambo, Mullumbimby death, I guess, New South Wales news, something like that.
You can also check out Octavio Reddick if you want to see an example of poor practices. I sat with him a long time ago. He's not allowed in Australia now, so I have absolutely no issues on naming names there, but he's put plenty of stuff up on YouTube, so if you want to understand why we need to educate people around dangerous practices, he tases people while they're under the influence of 5-MeO, and people have absolutely died. This is really serious. We love psychedelics. We just want them to be safe. And most of the time that's about the people, not the substance.
I believe you waterboard people as well. Yeah. It's the left-hand palm, you might call it. Anyway, back to you.
One more, and then we're going to go to questions. So as, I guess, protocol develops in universities, protocol develops around caring for people, protocol also develops around acquiring, picking, growing and sharing native plants and cactus and psychedelic cactus. So I was hoping Liam might share a little bit about the resources and your thoughts in that area. Now, obviously this isn't, you know, sometimes Liam's thoughts and ideas around conservation are not for everyone. They just want to be able to grab the plant, extract the shit out of it and have a good time, or talk to Buddha, whatever. But protocol is needed to protect the plants, to protect the origin of the plants, to protect the people, to protect the lineage of information around these plants, and to protect them from being extinct. Because extinction is a real thing that the ethnobotany community can inflict on native plants quite easily. So, Liam, do you mind speaking a little bit to this, and then we're going to go to questions.
Sure. So within the, I don't know, less than 15 years that I've been growing cactus, I have witnessed particular cultivars become extinct. So it really does happen, and I've watched it happen, and for sure we're going to see more of it happen. On a, please support our amazing charity level, the best way to learn about, I think, this issue is a resource that we made called the Lophophora, which is the genus that peyote is in, the Lophophora Conservation Reference Guide, which is, on our website, much like Kane's fantastic mushroom identification resource.
What's the URL for the website?
entheogenesis.org, thank you. So if you want to go deep dive, go and read that. But the short and simple summary of psychedelic cactus and conservation and what that means for us, basically, to simplify it, there's two mescaline cacti. Mescaline is a psychedelic that's in cacti, alright? There's a bunch of different psychedelics. Psilocybin is one, MDMA is more or less another. Those are the ones we've heard the most about. So, this psychedelic, mescaline, in two types of cacti, San Pedro, peyote. I just mentioned before, peyote is under threat in its native habitat. And as well as that, it grows very slow. It's part of the reason it's under threat. It takes so long to grow. And it's, compared to San Pedro, it's only a mildly more concentrated form of mescaline. And then San Pedro, on the other hand, grows like a weed. It's certainly not under threat in its natural habitat. There are some examples of, maybe there's a plant by a temple that has cultural significance, and that plant or that cultivar could become threatened if everyone went and cut the same plant. But for the most part, it's absolutely prolific in the wild. And the really interesting thing is that no matter where you are in the world, even if peyote or San Pedro don't grow natively, by growing your own, you are taking pressure off the native habitat, irrespective if you're consuming it or not, but just having it, you are reducing demand. So it's kind of a twofold message. First one, grow mescaline cactus. Second one, if people are consuming it and you've got to like try to impact demand and preference around that, choose San Pedro. It's an excellent choice, and I'm certainly not telling you to do that. That would be illegal. And certainly don't buy my cactus because it has mescaline in it. That would be crazy. But you can legally cultivate this plant, and it's great for the environment. And a cute side fact is that it's psychedelic. So yeah, grow San Pedro. It's an awesome plant. Easy to grow.
Can I just add to that, Dr. Engel, that you can buy these San Pedro cacti at Bunnings, for instance.
Yeah.
And talking about the cultural aspect of this, the Doors, the band, got their name eponymously from The Doors of Perception, the 1954 book by Aldous Huxley about his first mescaline experience. So there's a bit of a cultural linchpin for you in regards to how psychedelics have shaped the culture. If you like the music of The Doors, you're listening to mescaline. Yeah,
mescaline is like the classic psychedelic. It was any evidence of the earliest consumption of a psychedelic, perhaps of any psychoactive plant, it is evidence of mescaline cacti consumption. It was the first psychedelic that was kind of isolated, and then it was one of the first that then, as publicized by Aldous Huxley, came into the public eye as a psychedelic that people could access and consume. So it's, everyone's heard about magic mushrooms, but cacti is the classic.
To quote Timothy Leary, return to the source. What about William Blake? That title is from William Blake. Okay, questions? Has anyone got any questions for us?
I've got a statement to make.
You're the last question. You've got to say.
But I'm not going to make any more.
Okay,
I'm
go.
not going to be too vocal, but it's called the psychedelic experience, not the psychedelic explanation. That's from me.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone got a question? Yep.
Let's pick up on that. I mean, I'm a bit new into this in one sense. But so hearing about us talk about psychedelics, psychedelic means arising from the side. When you talk about psychedelic, yeah, I get a bit confused. Like anything could be, art can be psychedelic, or just
yeah. I think if you have an experience with plants and you build a relationship, and whatever you take from that is the most important thing.
So
you don't need to pin it onto anything. Yeah, psychoactive, psychotropic. I mean,
and we're called entheogenesis, right? And the word entheogen is another sidestep in the language that we use to describe these drugs. So entheogen is it's like the divine, right? Is it the experience of the divine? And that's trying to, again, people have problems with the word psychedelic because it relates to maybe some assumptions around what is a normal mental state and how that should be. And so entheogen is kind of going towards more spiritual spin to reframe drugs. And I think there's lots of like stigma in the language around how we use drugs, and it's cool to try to get outside that, but it is also challenging. And I think one problem with focusing on categories around drugs is that we use them to determine what are good drugs and what are bad drugs. And the cool thing about being Mardi Gras is everyone gets drug reform because pot, you understand it. But often people that come to the psychedelic space without experiencing the drug space from another context, they think that psychedelics are better than other drugs and we need different drugs, drug laws for psychedelics and other drugs, which is kind of correct on some level, but in my opinion, I think the most harms around drugs are created by a criminal culture, and focusing on the categories of drugs can distract from that.
Yeah, the other point was with peyote, the ceremony was the big thing. What the Indian brought the Indian people together. The big peyote ceremony was the meetings, and that was where where you're not on your own. That's the point, I think, of all of this.
Yeah, it brings people together.
Connection. I'll just finish by saying one before I go to the question here. So, Entheogenesis Australis is a not-for-profit charity. But on our website, we don't use the word psychedelic. We run a conference called the Psychedelic Symposium. You can go to a whole other website where it says psychedelic 479 times, but on our actual official website, we barely use the word psychedelic. So that's probably an indication of the fact that you need to, there's lots of stuff going on here. And I'll have to go with who I saw first, so I'll go with this question first.
Yeah, maybe just a general one for the benefit of the newcomers and even the heads. You all represent such specific aspects of community and plants, probably predictable what the answer might be, but if all of you could maybe respond to this question of what can we do in regard to activism, growing, support, research, that would be
Yeah,
nice.
I'll go quickly. You should only do to the level that you feel safe. So for me, in the early days, that I felt safe sharing plants, but now I feel safe basically standing up and talking in front of a crowd. I gave my first talk for the first time ever. I've run EGA for 20 years, I'm the president, and I've been putting the program together for 20 years, but I'd never stood on a stage. 2 weeks ago was the first time I've ever done that. So I now come to a point where I feel comfortable to push that activism publicly with my name. So I'm just giving an example for me. I've always worked in behind, trying to make sure that our community can research and find the best people to present this to the community and hopefully beyond. And that's always been my but now I feel comfortable picking up this mic, as much as I don't know how to hold it, and sharing. So that's me, and I'm going to go to Martin.
Well, you better be careful. He's got a taste for it now, so it's going to be very, very hard to get him off the stage, all right? So be aware.
Do you want to go?
Be prepared. Yeah, look, I really feel that, there are so many different facets and dimensions, and everybody here will have their own particular comfort zone. So, follow that. If you're particularly interested in the cannabis end of psychedelics, and there are people who firmly believe that cannabis is a psychedelic in its own right, of course, and so follow that one through. If there are people who are interested in medicalisation and the healing, the therapeutic potential, follow that through and find a way to support in your own way. Opening up the conversation is probably the very, very first step, and that's really what has brought us here together today. Obviously, Mardi Gras and the Symposium have opened up the conversation over an extended period of time, and I think we're all very fortunate, we're very privileged to be able to share this space and to discuss all of this openly. So certainly communication is the first step, and then find your own way to be involved, to support. Even just sort of growing your own at home, doing your own thing is a step in the right direction. So that's my just little 2 bits worth for what it's worth, which is tuppence.
I definitely would love to add a little bit onto that. So I do find that if you've got a story that's powerful, that means a lot. I was a methamphetamine addict and I overcame that with DMT, and I screamed it from the mountaintops. Not to say everyone was going to get cured by doing this or anything like that, but just I took psychedelics. I'm now a neuroscientist. My mind isn't broken, I'm not deranged, I'm not psychotic. Just actually lived the proofs in the pudding. I was nearly dead, now I'm doing great. So if you have a story like that, share it. But also, yeah, open up those conversations, because we actually have a cultural transition, and so the only way to get through that is to come together and talk about it. So you're all more than welcome to come along to the patch, but educate yourselves. Go on to EGA, go through their resources, go through our resources, all of them that you can. Educate yourself, because you are the people who are going to be protecting all of the people around you. You're going to be the people who are filtering out that information to help them when it comes their time to do it more safely. And you'll also learn a lot of really cool stuff along the way.
How do we find the patch, Pixie? What's the platform?
Oh, yeah, so we're on Facebook, so you can find us with the Psychedelically Aware Talking Circle Hub, the patch.
Facebook group, yep.
I would have to say develop a relationship with the plants themselves. Many of these plants are freely available. You can ask around the community. People, like with the cactus, people will happily give you cuttings, for example, or cuttings of various vines, or there's seeds available. I feel by developing the relationship with the plants or the fungi, you create a deeper, more significant relationship within yourself and understanding of the needs of the plants. and then if you go ahead and then consume said fungi or said plants, that relationship is deeper, and it resonates in a different way, I feel. And I think then beyond that, communicating that knowledge, having conversations with others, and also education, going and finding the books. There's so many amazing books that discuss the culture and the usage of these plants, and having an understanding of the traditional knowledge and how you can bring that forward into your own life and then communicate that again within your own communities. Talk to others, be open about it, come out of the cupboard. I think that's the thing. Like, we're now in a mature space where we can be open about this and talk about this freely. I think the more of us that do that, the more it's going to grow and it's become mature.
Talk to your mum, and when she gets it, talk to your mum's mum, and when she gets it, find every other relative you can talk to and talk to them, and then just keep it going.
Often your mum's mum might get it before your mum does.
Yeah, and I think just preference cultivated plants over wild plants, because when you don't know where your stuff comes from, that's how you have surprises in the environment, and we don't want surprises. Yeah, like specifically my concerns are acacia and peyote in that regards, but just generally, there's no need to take plants from the wild. Grow them. It's better for everyone.
One more.
Yeah, what have we got?
I have a question, but
You please.
mine's just a quick rookie question for
go.
you. So, what's your name again?
Liam.
Liam. San Pedro being a preferred source. Now, I'm getting confused. Trichoceres, Echinopsis has different things, and then there's this Pachanoi. Is San Pedro
Trichoceres or Echinopsis are both terms that might be used interchangeably for the genus. So, like Cannabis indica, cannabis is the genus, and Pachanoi or Pachanoi, I don't know how you're supposed to say it. Starts with a P. That is the species. So, like indica, yeah.
so Pachanoi is like a Trichoceres Echinopsis.
Yes, and for those playing along at home, it
And then-
appears of the three common Trichoceres species, Trichoceres pachanoi, Trichoceres peruvianus, Trichoceres bridgesii. Trichoceres bridgesii appears to have the most mescaline in it. What do you know?
So does San Pedro, is that a different category?
No, San Pedro is a general term for all the species within this group. So I've given you 3 names. People say there's as many as 30. Some people argue there's as little as 1. Taxonomists are annoying.
The taxonomy PC, predominant cultivar,
Yes.
aka San Pedro.
That's a cultivar.
Your video online?
Oh yeah, there's a number, but the
You know
best
the one.
on this issue, oh yeah, San Pedro Australiana. It's the one everyone likes. It's not my favourite, but there's a pretty video. But in terms of understanding all this drama, I've got a book. It's free online. You can also buy it, called the San Pedro Appreciation Guide. You can find that on my website, the Mescaline Garden. Thank you.
Just back to the naming. If you think about cannabis sativa, the common name for many years has been marijuana. So Marijuana, Mary Jane. San Pedro is Saint Peter, and so that's the common use name, the street name.
Colonialized.
Question back here?
Just wondering, you wanted to find out how a person should be medically ready to go on the journey. You know what I mean? Like all the stuff that's going on nowadays. And if you were going to be with someone, to be responsible for that person.
I'll let Martin.
Yeah, certainly an important consideration. I think the psychedelics that are commonly used in medicine are generally regarded as physically safe, as long as somebody is in reasonably good health, in good health overall, so physical health. For example, psilocybin and MDMA, which I guess we sort of put in a bit of an honorary psychedelic category, but psilocybin in particular is known to slightly increase blood pressure, increase heart rate, a couple of other things in the physical sense, but those are transient, and as long as somebody's in reasonably good sort of physical health, then there shouldn't be any particular issues there. The main consideration, of course, is their psychological health, and so somebody who might have a predisposition to psychosis or schizophrenia will probably be at a greater risk of complications, and so that's really where it's very important, okay? So certainly in the medical, in clinical trials, which are the general sort of way we've been working up until now, people are very carefully screened, that is likely to be relaxed very significantly as there's a translation from research into clinical practice in community clinics and that sort of thing. We need to be mindful of the risks, of course, and so we would hope that within the medical model anyway, due care is taken. But I think also if people are working sort of off-piste, I guess, you know, sort of beyond or outside the medical model into the community model, we really do need to take care of ourselves and each other. I've been quite involved over the years, as a couple of people here have, in the harm reduction space, in festivals and so on and so forth. So we've been working with people who in certain situations have been having a little bit too much fun, or maybe more fun than they bargained for. And so that's where we become very acutely aware of quite a few of the complications there. And so that's where I think in that community model, in that community context, we can really learn to take care of each other. So yeah, I hope I've answered your question okay. We do need to be aware of risks, but we need to mitigate them as best we can.
Is there a glossary or some kind of like information online for each psychedelic? Because each psychedelic affects our body differently. So if there was some information so that someone could prepare themselves, maybe see a doctor or do a blood test or things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Probably Ronnie and Liam are very well equipped to talk about this, but there are certain risk matrices, and particularly things like combinations can be very, very complicated and difficult to predict. So yeah, I'll hand it back to those guys.
Say great t-shirt first. Liam's definitely, we have made an amazing resource.
Yeah, well, so the resource they're talking about there specifically refers to combinations, which is quite a common risk that people face when they're using drugs. So the EGA resource is called the Entheogen Combination Matrix, quite a mouthful, sorry. And there's another one called the Guide to Drug Combinations. But basically the way these charts work is by putting a list of all the different drugs, or in our case plants, along two axes of a chart, and then when the two intersect, we code that cell with a risk. So it's like if I have cannabis and I want to have mushrooms, that cell is blue, and blue means that there's synergy. So I know that it's going to increase the effects. But on other combinations, for example, amphetamines and cannabis, that's given a low-level risk, and the reason being because there's an increased chance of like anxiety and looping and things like that. But in terms of your question around more tailored to specific drugs, and I think you want more detail than's provided in these charts. Sadly, we don't have a comprehensive cover of that as resources. We're working on developing it, but my area that I would encourage people to look is use Arrowwood. You likely already know that, but if you don't, Arrowwood is kind of my first stop shop for understanding what is it like to take this drug that I've just heard about. I can go and read someone that's written a little journal entry of what happened to them, and it will have been selected so it's somewhat of a good archetype of people that commonly have this, what is a common experience. So yeah, Arrowwood is a good way to get a handle on that.
Dance-wise.
What's your feeling on Wikipedia?
Yeah, I don't know about Wikipedia. I don't mind Psychonaut Wiki, that's okay, but Wikipedia for drug effects, I don't know. Arrowwood is good.
Dance-wise, the Conscious Nest.
Wikipedia is probably alright, just not as good.
How do you say that?
Arrowwood, E-R-O-W-I-D.
Yeah, which is a great resource. It's like DMT Nexus, and there's a few things out there where people actually, Blue Light, talk about their experiences. I found them very helpful for getting a sense of what to expect. I just wanted to add a note around when it comes to physical health conditions interacting, which I think is often left out of the conversation, and there's no easy answers there. But there are communities of people with chronic health problems and things who are using psychedelics or self-treating. It can be a little bit tricky to find them, but that's probably your best source of, I guess, information from experience, what's helped, what hasn't, or what to stay away from. Otherwise, it starts to get into that area of physiology and how is this drug going to interact with my health problem. I'm happy to chat to you afterwards if you'd like, but it is actually a really important area that we're going to have to start navigating more, especially as like we're mostly treating mental health problems, but we've got a lot of people with chronic health problems with severe depression and things like that. So yeah, it's something we've got to work on.
Yeah, just from the approach of from the physical health side of things rather than the mental health side of things. Shani, you know a bit of my story. Yeah, I did a journey of more than 16 years of major fibromyalgia. I've got myalgic encephalomyelitis, and I'm one of those people. It's like I don't have the word no. It's like I just keep looking for the answers because I'm pretty sure they're out there. Most of them seem to be in the pain world. Yay! So that's good. And we're very fortunate to live in a country where a lot of those plants are accessible to us. I came across certain new research in the last couple of years talking about fibromyalgia and great research on microdosing, which I went, hey, I live in the middle of a cow farm. Bonus! I'm going to try this out because I'm not willing to wait for the research to back up what I feel I'm quite comfortable to do. What I want to know is what I found was that it worked a lot better for me. Microdosing was great, and it did. Yay, I'm a success story. Woo! 16 years with extreme fibromyalgia, having migraines that lasted for months, being in a state of extreme pain levels, not being able to get out of bed sometimes for weeks, hey, I'm not depressed because I'm not in pain. They talk about it's going for depression. Well, if you're not in pain, you're not depressed. It helps. It's certainly a big part of the process. I know it's the catch-22, but what I also found was that using other nutritional supports was really effective with microdosing. Things like vitamin B12 was really excellent because they talk now about psilocybin repairing nerve and brain, reconnecting, repairing, etc. Vitamin B12 accelerates nervous system repair. So, is there much being done on looking at things like high-dose lecithin, phosphatidylglycerine, in terms of it also doing brain repair? So is there much being done in terms of us looking also at nutritional support?
I'm not sure how much there is in terms of directly with the nutritional support, though some people are starting to delve into that, but I do also thank you for bringing up the point that, like I was just talking to Martin about yesterday, there's so much focus on the mental health stuff. There's actually some really amazing research out there. A lot of it is behind paywall, so if you've got, access to a university or something, but otherwise it can be pretty tricky to get some of it, but there is definitely a fair bit you can even still find through Google on actually helping neuroinflammation, on helping with neurodegenerative conditions. In particular, we're not talking about the psychedelic effects. It's not helping you process problems necessarily. We're not even looking at just the serotonin receptor that always gets all the attention. We're looking at things like TAR1, we're looking at things like Sigma-1, all those intracellular pathways, and there's actually a lot that is really, really promising in that area of neurodegenerative conditions. These are the most profound things. We're talking about MS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, things like that, the worst of the worst. And it is early days, but it is promising. Even with stroke, it was able to stop the neurons from exciting themselves to death so much. Ed Freshka was a great research, huge fan of his. So he's been actually writing about this for years, and some other researchers that he works with. It's just not talked about as much, but I think this is actually the really big thing for psychedelics for me, but definitely the mental health stuff too. But thank you, and I hope the nutritional stuff will pan out.
We've got time for one more question.
Ginkgo biloba, I want to add is...
Have we got one?
The neurodegenerative protective herb par excellence.
Thank you. All right. Well, here we go.
EGA or Liam, are you guys maybe able to do some kind of post and stack a bunch of links for everyone for just everything that's been discussed today? Just to help? Is that doable? Or?
If you head to our website, which you'd be better saying, Liam, because I always get stumbled up.
All right. There are, honestly, off the top of my head, we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm not exactly sure everything we've covered. But you are more than welcome to email us or contact us on social media, and I can give you exactly what you want directly. But you should be able to find pretty much everything we've talked about on the Entheogenesis website and on our YouTube channel, Entheo TV. And I think the majority of it is going to be in a particular tab that's called Resources on our website. So you want to look at resources. That's where lots of these kind of PDF printable you know, short form articles that go in depth on how to identify mushrooms, how to identify cactus, how to deal with conservation. That's where the bulk of that is. But yeah, feel free to get in touch if you can't find it, and I'll let you know. And once I figure out what all the things are, I could easily make a post on social media that lists all the things. But it is a little bit beyond me at this point, and I do want to get more high after this event.
Do you want to drop the URL again? What's the URL website?
entheogenesis.org.
I want to finish on an acknowledgement. I look across here and it's mainly men. I want to have an acknowledgement that EGA has a program that's generally at least 45% women, run by women, but beyond that, activism, education and community could not be brought together more in anyone than the person who actually organised this conference, Kathleen Williamson, is the most important, deeply amazing female that has been doing so much work to keep activism, community and education going. So I just want to acknowledge that even in EGA, most of the work, a lot of is many females, beautiful ladies and amazing people are the flower that make this happen. So I just want to say, I'm thankful to be here with my friends, but I am so thankful to the amazing women that make this all possible.
Yeah.